What you're going to see here today is you will see the first version of this presentation that I've given. I've just put it together recently. The last presentation, the last major presentation that I gave was really almost a year ago in South Africa, in Johannesburg, South Africa. And in that interim, we've had some really major developments occur with the DNA. So that's why I'm coming here to do this tour of England. And I will tell you that one of the things you're going to see, a very brief thing, the geneticist has finally done an abstract, there you go, an abstract of what he's done over the last 2 years, 18, 20 months, to pull as much out as he could and do all that with minimum financing. All right, everybody ready to go? Rock and roll? All right, as you see, this is a statement from Dr. Ted Robinson. In 40 years of practice as a reconstructive plastic surgeon, I have never seen anything like it. I doubt if anyone else has either. Ted is the guy, or one of the major players in the early days of the Starchild. He helped arrange the first DNA test, but he is a craniofacial plastic surgeon, retired now. And he has always been a big supporter of it. He knows what it is because of his experience. Next slide. Next slide, there you go.
Is that it? No.
Okay.
Hold on.
The Starchild was found in Mexico about 1930 by a young girl. She doesn't know how old she was, 12, 13, 14. 100 miles southwest of Chihuahua, which is there, and that's in the range of the Copper Canyon area. It's high desert area. Next slide. High desert like you would find around the Grand Canyon.
Just
Get a hammer.
That's it.
High desert area like you'd find around the Grand Canyon or something like that. And in a cave, in a mine tunnel in the area, in an abandoned mine tunnel, she was out exploring, as kids will do, and she had a basket with her, and she found up in the mine tunnel, where she could still see, lying on the floor of the mine tunnel, was a skeleton, a human skeleton lying on its back, 1930. A kid didn't freak out when they saw a skeleton, dogs and things in that area, because the bones would stay. So she noticed beside it, when she got a little closer, was a mound of dirt, and coming out of that dirt was what she called a misshapen hand. And that misshapen hand was wrapped around the upper arm bone of the skeleton lying on its back on the dirt. That one's in the dirt, but the hand's coming out. So she knows something's in there, and she can see, because it's in a mine tunnel, it's never been compacted by rain or anything like that. So with her hand, she's able to dig it out, and she exposes the whole skeleton. She tries to recover the two skeletons. It's a long story. She tries to hide them. A flash flood washes everything away, and all she's able to recover is the two skulls with a little bit of damage to each from being tumbled down in the flash flood. Long story, not worth getting into it here. So she recovers the skulls, and she brings them home, and she keeps them as souvenirs. And as she grows up, she shellacks the skulls to preserve them, which people did back then. Puts them in a cardboard box, keeps them her whole life, basically in her garage in El Paso, Texas. And as she's dying in the early 90s, she wills them like you would pets or something like that to some friends. Her husband was a Border Patrol agent. He wasn't that comfortable with having two skulls in a box in the garage. So the friends say, yeah, we'll take them, and they keep them for 5 years, but he's an FBI agent, and he's not that comfortable with it either. So then they meet this couple called Ray and Melanie Young, and Melanie is a neonatal nurse, been a neonatal nurse for 15 years. So he said, would you mind having a deformed, because that's what they believed, that the weird skull was a deformed skull. Would you mind having a deformed skull? And this lady died, and we don't want to throw it away. And they said, yeah, sure, we'll take it. So next slide. Ray and Melanie, again, all these people in El Paso, Texas, Melanie, Ray, obviously. And Melanie had been a neonatal nurse, as I said, and she took one look at it, and she says, it's not a human deformity. That is too light, It's too symmetrical. It doesn't look anything like a human. It doesn't have human anything. This is not a human deformity. And both she and Ray were members of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network of El Paso. And so Melanie says to Ray, I think it's the skull that would fit in the head of a gray alien. Because when you hear the prototypical descriptions of gray aliens, they have that large kind of heart-shaped build here with that crease down the middle, and they have that very fine pointed lower face, and she says it's got all of that. I think it's that. And he says, you know, okay, well, we'll find out, but he's not as convinced as she is. So they take it out to a couple of experts in El Paso, I mean, real true experts from the universities and stuff, and they just tell them immediately, it's a cradle-boarded hydrocephalus, take it home, forget about it, don't worry about it, it's nothing, it's a cradle-boarded hydrocephalus, which I also heard many times. It's the standard reply of somebody who doesn't want to deal with it, or doesn't know what they're talking about, and they just want it out of their place, out of their space. So when they got that, Melanie says these people are giving us a run around. We need somebody that'll work on it. So they went to the El Paso MUFON meeting, and they said, who in the field of alternative knowledge knows anything about skulls? And that's how my name came up. They said, there's this guy in Louisiana, Lloyd Pye, he talks about skulls. In my other work, with hominoids and human origins and things like that. So everybody always asks, how'd you get it? That's how I got it. So they said, the next time you're in El Paso, would you come by? We have something to show you. They showed me, and I thought it had to be some kind of deformity, but I didn't know what. I'd never seen anything like it before, but the idea of holding an alien skull in my hands was at first very impossible, just couldn't be. Like finding the Dead Sea Scrolls or something, couldn't do it. But by the end of that year, but I said, it is very weird, and I will try to find out for you what it is. And I began to take it to experts, and I began to get the answers that I would get from the expert, whether it was ear or brain or neck or face or head or whatever. I can't explain my part of it. I've never seen it, but I know it has to be some kind of deformity. Everything else has to be covered, but I can't explain my part of it. We have 10 or 12 guys say, I can't tell you my specialty area, I can't explain it, but it has to be some kind of deformity. You know they're all just flailing for an answer. Anyway, next slide. This is the two skulls lined up together. That's the human one that was found, a couple of different shots here. And that's, of course, the Starchild. And you see the differences in every position. You have 25 major physical differences. There is not a single similarity on this skull to that skull. There's not a point of reference on the skull where you can say that's exactly the same in human and Starchild. Everything is different. Next slide. We start out here with the front view of the adult female and the Starchild skull. Note the eye sockets, the difference in the eye sockets. The brow ridges, you know, this swelling here is the brow ridges. Nasal dip, you know, dip in the nose, no dip in the nose. Completely different, starting out at those basic things. Next slide. Profile, you see that a human eye socket is about 2 inches deep. My finger would go in to that much. If here, the Starchild, it would go like about that. It's about a ½ inch. So you have an amazing difference there. Then you have, again, the brow ridges. All humans have that. The Starchild doesn't have a trace of brow ridge. You have the dip in the nose where you come down off the brow ridge to the nose. Starchild goes, as you see, just like a ski jump right down. So completely different, just starting again at these very basic things. Next slide. With the profile shot, you hear these brace bones that you see here. People say, what's this? It's called a pterygoid plate, and you have 2 of them, one on each side of your face, up under there, and it braces your maxilla, right? So if you get a really good shot in the grill, it doesn't just go right back in and crush your brain and kill you. So this is one of the most important bones in your body in terms of physical impact in your face. Got to have a pterygoid plate. You're no good. But as you see, the size of this one versus the size of this one. The ear holes are different too. This is shoved over, but that does have an ear hole. We'll talk about this, but this is the zygomatic arch, and you see here it flares out and goes around. Here it's tucked in much tighter to the face because it's going to have a much tighter face. And the inion, we all have an inion. Anything with a head on a neck has a spot back there. You can all feel your own. You have a knot back there. It's called the inion. It's where your neck muscles attach. You see the human has one, Starchild does not. In fact, it has a dent you're going to see. It's not just different, it's like super different. Next slide. Okay, top view crowns. You see that a normal human skull is rounded in the crown back, and Starchild has an abnormal, very strange crease, but it's very symmetrical. It's more symmetrical in the way it's put together than is the human skull. That is a typical human skull. All of our skulls are asymmetrical. Starchild is very symmetrical, surprisingly symmetrical. Next slide. Now, the rear view, the sutures in the Indians, you see how the difference in the rear of the head is. This is the same pretty much volume of bone here for the occipital, but it's like somebody took it and just pulled it up and straightened it out. And this is the same three-point junction of the cranium. You know, do you know about the plates of your brain when you're born? These are separated by and held together by ligaments so that you can squeeze out your mother's birth canal. Your head turns into a tube while it's going out, and then it comes out, and very quickly it expands up, and over the next 2 years they fill in with these things like this, and they seal. And that's in 2 years. And the last part to go is the part up here, the soft spot, the fontanelle. Okay, so that's how that works. Now the Indian, again, human Indian bump, a dent here. You can feel it. It's an absolute indentation where there should be an extrusion. Next slide. Okay, the balance points of the cranium is very interesting. Well, the human face, human skull rather, the face is imbalanced because we have those deep eye sockets, we have big frontal sinuses in here, we have hollow noses, hollow mouths, so it's like a fat kid and a skinny kid. You've got to move it, you've got to move the fulcrum back in favor of the skinny kid to give them more leverage. So our necks are centered, you can just see mine or anybody's, back of center to make it work right. The Starchild is completely different. Its balance point is dead center down the middle because you got all this here, and you're missing this back here, and you got all this here, and you're missing the air up front because you've got that very shallow eye socket, you have no sinuses, which you'll see in a minute, and you've got a very small lower face. So the fulcrum has to be moved over, and the center of gravity has to be moved over such that it's dead center. What does that allow it to do? One thing is it has a very skinny neck, which we're going to see. Very skinny neck. Now, you guys know cricket, so I'll use a cricket example. You take a cricket bat and you hold it down at the handle and you hold it absolutely straight vertically. Any of you can hold it like this very easily. You move it 2-3 degrees off of dead center and suddenly you start to strain because the weight suddenly increases. We have that with our heads and our necks. This is balanced on that skinny little neck like the cricket bat held absolutely vertically. Next slide. This is the brain, the different pressures on the cerebellums. Now, your cerebellum is an area back here about the size of my fist, in the back of your brain back here, and that is you. This is your software. All this stuff about your thinking capacity and all that, you need that, yeah, but this runs you. This is your urine, your bowels, your heartbeat, your blood pumping. This is your software that never stops running. This is you. You hurt that, you're dead. Russians, they execute you, they kneel you down, one bullet in that, gone. That, the cerebellum, you just can't go without that. So with this one, as you see, with the human, all this 3-pound weight presses down on this. Well, this is designed in such a way that it's in the curve here because it has to hold up for the course of your life in good shape. It can't allow this pressure to come down and squeeze it out of the neck hole because you'll die if that happens. So it has to be set in place. So it's set in the curve of the back of your head, and there are ridges of bone in here that it sets and holds up against, so that it's built really, really well to do what it has to do. The Starchild doesn't have that. Those ridges are just down to nubs. They're not really there. And you have all this brain back here pressing down this way, so it's like a fat kid going down a slipper slide. It should just be swoosh right out of the neck hole. So when the first brain guy saw it, he was doing all this, he says, this thing either doesn't have a cerebellum like we have, or whatever its brain material is made of, it's 3 or 4 times harder than ours. It's like much more gelatinous than ours. And our brain is pretty doggone gelatinous.